He turned from these things at once to remark what had been for some time in his mind. I think, Skinner, I shall kill one of these chicks as a specimen. I think we will kill it this afternoon, and I will take it back with me to London. He pretended to peer into another gallipot and took off his spectacles to wipe them. I should like, he said, very much to have some relic, some memento of this particular brood at this particular day. By the by, he said, you don't give those little chicks meat. Oh, no, sir, said Skinner. I can assure you, sir, we know far too much about the management of fowls of all description to do anything of that sort. Quite sure you don't throw out your dinner refuse. I thought I noticed the bones of a rabbit scattered about the far corner of the run. But when they came to look at them, they found there were the larger bones of a cat, picked very clean and dry. Well, I should think I knew a chick when I saw it, said Mr. Bensington's cousin Jane hotly. It's too big for a chick, for one thing. And besides, you can see perfectly well it isn't a chick. It's more like a bustard than a chick. For my part, said Redwood reluctantly, allowing Bensington to drag him into the argument, I must confess that, considering all the evidence. Oh, if you do that, said Mr. Bensington's cousin Jane, instead of using your eyes like a sensible person. Well, but really, Miss Bensington. Oh, go on, said cousin Jane. You men are all alike. Considering all the evidence, this certainly falls within the definition. No doubt it's abnormal and hypertrophied, but still, especially since it was hatched from the egg of a normal hen, yes, I think, Miss Bensington, I must admit this, so far as anyone can call it anything, is sort of a chick. You mean, it's a chick, said cousin Jane. I think it's a chick, said Redwood. What nonsense, said Mr. Bensington's cousin Jane. And oh, directed at Redwood's head, I haven't patience with you. And then suddenly she turned about and went out of the room with a slam. It's with you. And then suddenly, without any urgency from Mr. Bensington, he sat down in the low armchair by the fire and confessed to proceedings that even in an unscientific man would have been indiscreet. You will think it very rash of me, Bensington, I know, he said, but the fact is, I put a little, not very much of it, but some, into baby's bottle very nearly a week ago. But suppose, cried Mr. Bensington. I know, said Redwood, and glanced at the giant chick on the plate, on the table. It's turned out all right, thanks goodness. He felt in his pocket for his cigarettes. He gave fragmentary details. Poor little chap wasn't putting on weight. Desperately anxious, Mrs. Redwood. You know, man, with a manner like a cliff, towering. No confidence in me, of course. Scarcely allowed in the nursery. Something had to be done. Slipped in while the nurse was at breakfast. Got at the bottle. But he'll grow, said Mr. Bensington. He's growing. 27 ounces last week. Dear me. The bother is to keep it up, said Redwood. They won't trust me in the nursery alone. I tried to get a growth curve. And how I'm to give him a second dose. Need you? He's been crying 2 days. Can't get on with his ordinary food again anyhow. He You want some more now? Bensington stood for a space, smoothing down the breast of a giant chick. They will be monstrous fowls, he said. They will, said Redwood. Big as horses, said Bensington. Bigger, said Redwood. That's just it. Bensington turned away from the specimen. Redwood, he said, these fowls are going to create a sensation. Redwood nodded his head at the fire. Fowls are going to create a sensation. So will your little boy. That's just what I'm thinking of, said Redwood. He sat back, sighed, threw his unconsumed cigarette into the fire, and thrust his hands deep into his trousers pockets. That's precisely what I'm thinking of. This food of the gods to be queer stuff to handle. The pace that chick must have grown at. A little boy growing at that pace, said Mr. Bensington slowly, and stared at the chick as he spoke. I say, said Bensington, he'll be big. I shall give him diminishing doses, said Redwood. It's rather too much of an experiment. Much. Yet still, you know, I must confess, some baby will sooner or later have to try it. Or we'll try it on some baby, certainly. Exactly so, said Bensington, and came and stood on the hearthrug and took off his spectacles to wipe them. Until I saw these chicks, Redwood, I don't think I began to realize anything of the possibilities of what we were making. It's only beginning to dawn upon me, the possible consequences. And even then, you know, Mr. Bensington was far from any conception of the mind that little train will fire. It happened early in June. For some weeks, Bensington was kept from revisiting the experimental farm, and one necessary flying visit was made by Redwood. He returned an even more anxious-looking parent than he had gone. Altogether, there were 7 weeks of steady, uninterrupted growth. And then the wasps began their career. It was late in July, and nearly a week before the hens escaped from Hickley Brow, that the first of the big wasps was killed. The report of it appeared in several papers, but I do not know whether the news reached Mr. Bensington, much less whether he connected it with the general laxity of method that prevailed in the experimental farm. Be but little doubt now that while Mr. Skinner was plying Mr. Bensington's chicks with the food of the gods, a number of wasps were just as industriously, perhaps more industriously, carrying quantities of the same paste to their early summer broods in the sandbanks beyond the adjacent pine woods. And there can be no dispute, whatever that these early broods found just as much growth and benefit in the substance as Mr. Bensington's hens. It is in the nature of the wasp to attain to effective maturity before the domestic fowl. And in fact, of all the creatures that were, through the generous carelessness of the Skinners, partaking of the benefits Mr. Bensington heaped upon his hens, the wasps were the first to make any sort of figure in the world. There was a keeper named Godfrey on the estate of Lieutenant Colonel Rupert Hick near Maidstone, who encountered and had the luck to kill the first of these monsters, of whom history has any record. He was walking knee-high in bracken across an open space in the beechwoods of that diversity, Lieutenant Colonel Hick's Park. And he was carrying his gun, very fortunately for him, a double-barreled gun, over his shoulder when he first caught sight of the thing. It was, he says, coming down against the light so that he could not see it very distinctly. And as it came, it made a drone like a motor car. He admits he was frightened. It was evidently as big or bigger than a barn owl, and to his practiced eye, its flight and the particularly misty whirl of its wings must have seemed weirdly unbird-like. The instinct of self-defense, I fancy, mingled with long habit when, as he said, he let fly right away. The awareness of the experience probably affected his aim. At any rate, most of his shot missed, and the thing merely dropped for a moment with an angry buzz that revealed the wasp at once, and then rose again with all its stripes shining against the light. He says it turned on him. At any rate, he fired his second barrel at less than 20 yards and threw down his gun, ran a pace or so, and ducked to avoid it. It flew, he is convinced, within a yard of him, struck the ground, rose again, and came down again, perhaps 30 yards away, and rolled over with its body wriggling and its sting stabbing out and back in its last agony. He emptied both barrels into it again before he ventured to go near. When he came to measure the thing, he found it was 27.5 inches across, its open wings, and its sting was 3 inches long. The abdomen was blown clear off from its body, but he estimated the length of the creature from head to sting as 18 inches, which is very nearly correct. Its compound eyes were the size of penny pieces. First authenticated appearance of these giant wasps.